Start with Borneo, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like with Borneo, like that was our first island crossing, and that was the one we kind of really realised like what we'd got ourselves in for. And when during the planning phase, we'd been poring over like old maps. The most accurate mapping we could get was like 1 in 50,000 scale, which is not very accurate. And we'd worked our route out, and we realised we could get as far, because we were doing east to west, we realised in the centre of the island we could get as far west as a little village up in the mountains, and then there was this huge jungle-clad mountain range called the Mulashwana Range, and we could get to this village, and then there was nothing for 40 kilometres as the crow flies until the other side of the mountain range. There was another tiny little village up in the mountains. So like we kind of like hedged all our bets on being able to get to this village and finding a local that would know the way, because these places are so remote. Like there's got to be, we thought there must have been like a jungle trail or something, and the closer we were getting to this settlement, like we were talking with the locals, it was becoming like fairly apparent that there was only like one guy who would potentially know the way, a guy called Bapa Jaco. And like we heard about this guy from about 100 kilometres away in these little villages, like just saying, "Oh, you need to find Bapa Jaco." So yeah, we were aiming on meeting this guy.
Yeah. So yeah, local knowledge is key in these places where it's so remote, and we made it to this last settlement. Probably about 50 people lived in this settlement, in beautiful, set off this green river that's coming straight off the Mulashwana mountain range. Beautiful. Found this guy called Bapa Jagal.
I think we were like maybe 700 kilometres in there, maybe 800, something like that.
Yeah.
Like we were
fairly far in, but still not over halfway really. And we found this guy, and he was like the real deal Dayak tribal man. You know, he was ripped. He had his parang, and he came walking up this path with a handful of fish he'd just caught out the river. He had long dark hair. He looked as legitimate jungle ninja as you could imagine, right? And we said, you know, this is our plan, and it took a long time for us to be able to tell him exactly what we wanted to do.
2 days of like just sat in his house, like because I like learned Bahasa before I went, so I was like chatting in like this broken Bahasa with him because he didn't speak any English, like, so we're just like poring over maps and like trying to get through what we needed, and like he knew what we needed, and he wanted a hell of a lot of money off us to take us, and like we didn't have the money to pay him as much as he wanted. We said we could give him some money, and then we could give him some of our gear in exchange, and it, like you're saying, it took about a couple of days before we got across what we needed, and he'd agreed to take us. So like we set out into the jungle, and like end of the first day he just left us. And we're like, oh.
Yeah, so he just disappeared. So he just went home basically, and it was pretty clear that at that point, like, there was no tribal routes across this mountain range. There was no settlements. There was, you know, it was properly unexplored wilderness at this point, and we decided to keep going, in the hope that we would, in the hope that we'd be able to get it cracked and get to the other side.
We knew like the village, like we said, was 40 kilometres away, and we're like, we had enough food for a week. There was streams and things like that along the way, so like 40k in a week, like that is achievable in anybody's books. And then you actually begin to appreciate like the sheer magnitude of what getting through jungle actually is, like proper jungle,
mountain jungle.
And we were scrabbling up like these gelatinous mud banks, like they were almost cliffs, was falling down the other side, hacking through like this vegetation that was just lethal, just like cutting us to shreds. And like I think the second day after he'd left us, we'd covered like in 12 hours of fucking like giving everything we had. We'd covered like less than 2 kilometres, and it was like fuck.
It was just It was so demoralising to cover such little ground, you know, with such effort, whole day, best effort, and that, you know, you've covered less than 2 kilometres. It's just so demoralising. And we sort of reached a point where we were both completely exhausted, and we had run out of food, and we were still in the centre of this jungle, and it was like,
we can't go back, we can't go forward.
We couldn't go back, we couldn't go forward, and it was now like this could be easily a survival situation. This was our first expedition, so we didn't have the resources to get casualty evacuation cover. We were there, Ant and I, in the middle of this jungle in the centre of Borneo, no food, both exhausted, properly on our own. And it was, at that point, it was a, you know, I
remember thinking, like, what the fuck's my ego got me into? Like, what are we doing? And like, we were so close to coming fully unstuck, just on, you know, like, what was us trying to do something cool at the time.
Yeah.
And then we sat. I remember one evening we had the maps out, we had the GPS out, and like Louis was like, "There's like we kind of crested the mountains, and the settlement was still a fair way away, but the river that ran through the settlements like started only a few kilometres away. So we were like, well, what if we hit the river and try and like put some kind of like raft together?"
Yeah,
was the idea.
It was like the headwaters of a river on the map. And we sort of took the risk that by looking at the contours on the map, that the water might start a little bit further up than it actually showed on the map, so that we could hopefully aim for the top of this river. And if there's a river, then we could make a bamboo raft, because there's loads of bamboo kicking around, and we could hopefully paddle downstream to the settlement. So we took a risk. Well, that was really our only option. That's what we did, and we made it to a river. We made a raft, and we paddled down, and eventually got to a small settlement. And you know, we made it to the other side of the mountain range.
Oh, it's funny explaining to the locals in that village, like, we just come from central Kalimantan, and they were just like,
yeah, they didn't think it was possible.
Yeah, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
But that really hit home to us, like how on expeditions like that, on like what we do, like, you cannot leave anything to chance. Like, we learned the hard way, and we got schooled the hard way, and it's probably like one of the darkest points of my life was being in that jungle thinking, oh, I'm never going to see my mum again, I'm never going to see my family again. Like,
yeah, so
like
scary stuff. Yeah.
But we guffed it, like.
Yeah, we got through it just about. So yeah, that was probably one of the stickier spots on the Borneo expedition.